Deputy Michael Lowry.
Yeah, Taoiseach, on the same subject, whatever about the reality, the perception out there amongst the working people, they are questioning the misuse of public monies. I'd just like to ask a question in relation to PwC, who have been engaged by the government to explain this gross miscalculation. I'm curious to understand what procurement procedure was followed to appoint this firm, because you could argue that a conflict of interest exists because of the fact that PwC received in excess of €30 million over the last 9 years in fees from BAM. So we now have a situation where PwC are conducting an analysis and an assessment of the reasons why we have this gigantic overrun. BAM will most certainly play a central role in that examination. And I'm just wondering, Taoiseach, can you explain why wasn't the CNAG not utilised as the watchdog to carry out this function, considering that their statutory remit is to improve the use of public money, resources and strengthen public accountability? Is it the case that the CNAG is not adequately staffed to provide this resource? And I would ask the question, why are we farming out so much of our public service work to a small select group of accountancy and legal firms? Is it accurate to contend that the public service no longer has the talent or the expertise to conduct such onerous exercises? And at a time generally when many Irish households struggle with everyday costs like childcare, with mortgages, rent and insurance, there is a strongly held sentiment on the ground that public monies are being squandered with unnecessary layers of bureaucracy. Growing numbers of quangos, yes, the quangos are most definitely back, and committees of review are established, yet no one is held responsible for costly decisions. In 2011, Fine Gael and Labour separately promised to abolish or merge many dozens of what they described as wasteful agencies. Fine Gael listed 145 quangos which would be terminated when they came to power. And while a total of 62 were terminated, as many as 40 new agencies have been created, 14 of which involved mergers of old agencies. We now have an estimated 257 quangos in existence at enormous cost to the taxpayer. It is ironic that their existence creates further distance between the Minister or the department in question when policy issues, controversies or blame arises. The quango culture, Taoiseach, is alive and thriving at a growing cost to the Irish taxpayer, while at the same time diminishing even more the responsibility of the Minister or the department involved. So I would ask you, Taoiseach, I would say to you that the cost of administering the state, together with so much unaccountable allocations of public monies, is infuriating for a hard-pressed workforce. I would ask you to know what measures you can take as Taoiseach and government to rein in the cost of public administration. Taoiseach.
Thanks very much, Deputy. You'll be aware, obviously, the main cost of public administration is salaries, and as we increase pay across the public sector over this year and next year, that is likely to rise. The number of state agencies, state bodies, as you rightly acknowledge, has reduced in the last number of years, but not by as much as perhaps we had intended. One of the bodies that was established, one of the new bodies that was established, was the National Paediatric Hospital Development Board, because the view was taken that the skills perhaps did not exist within existing agencies to deliver a project of this scale, and a dedicated body was established by government, given statutory powers by these Oireachtas to build that project, and perhaps on reflection that was not the right thing to do, and perhaps HSE Estates, which has done such a good job on other health projects, might have done as good a job, or if not a better job, on this project, but we're beyond that point now. In terms of the work being undertaken by PwC, the commissioning of this review was done by the HSE, which has a framework for the provision of professional services to assist in the programme for health service improvement. It provides resourcing and experience to be drawn down from PwC as required. And under the terms of this framework, it was agreed that PwC would carry out a review of cost increases relating to the new Children's Hospital construction project. The terms of reference have been finalised and have been published, and the review is scheduled for completion by the end of March, subject to the availability of relevant documentation and personnel, and will inform any governance or other changes required. In relation to the Deputy's question on the Controller and Auditor General, This was raised by the PAC, or at the PAC, on the 31st of January, including what information was available to the Department and the Group at any given time. It was acknowledged that the role of the CNAG is to look back on expenditure that has already been incurred. As deputies will be aware, this is a controversy about 450 million that the government has decided will be spent in the years ahead. This expenditure has not yet been incurred. So far, between 200 and 250 million has been spent on the project, and that is on budget and on time. The controversy relates to spending that is yet to happen, but we believe it's the right decision to go ahead with this project because suspending it or stalling it could mean we've no children's hospital for a generation. Retendering will probably cost more. And the role of the CNAG is to look back at expenditure that has been incurred. This expenditure has not been incurred. This is not about a waste of taxpayers' money. This is about underestimating the true cost of this project. But in response to questions from committee members as to whether he might examine the project at some point, the CNAG did not rule it out if, as he said, it could add something valuable. But again, he noted that typically his role will be to look back on expenditure previously occurred. In relation to conflicts of interest, the HSE has confirmed that it is satisfied that there are no conflicts of interest with regard to the review by PwC of the escalation of costs associated with the construction of the new hospital. The HSE has indicated that they are aware that PwC were auditors to BAM, but that contract ceased at the end of 2015, which means it's 4 years since PwC has audited BAM.
Thank you. Taoiseach, Deputy Lowry.
Yes, Taoiseach, I agree with you that the National Children's Hospital should progress, but there's obviously a question that the public are demanding value for money while it does progress. On the general point that I've made, we have 257 in this country, agencies and quangos, as we used to call them. And at the same time, we witness all the errors, the mistakes and the abject system failures right across the public service. And you could only conclude, after all of those mistakes, that governance has disimproved. A decline in public confidence exists despite the massive cost in the increase of oversight. I would ask you, Taoiseach, are all these quangers and oversight bodies, are they necessary? Have you any plans to review the agencies? Will you ensure that a stocktake is done? Have you already identified any for abolition? Because I would have to say to you that the public are bewildered with this wastage of public funds at a time when they are enduring personal, financial strain and pressure. The public want to see restoration of proper responsibility and accountability, particularly in relation to these major projects that are underway.
We have seen a significant rationalisation of public bodies in recent years. The House will be aware that town councils were abolished, education and training boards, firmly VECs, were merged. The county enterprise boards were abolished as standalone entities and reintegrated into local authorities, and there were a lot of mergers. To give one small example, the sports campus with the sports council. And certainly if the deputy or any members have suggestions of public bodies that should be abolished or merged, the government would be interested to hear which ones members would like to see abolished and the reasoning behind that. But what is undoubted about this is that lessons have to be learned by government and will be learned. And among the things we decided to examine as a cabinet this morning was whether in future we should avoid two-phase tenders. There are definitely advantages to it, but there may be disadvantages as well, because you don't know the full cost of a project until the second tender comes in. Whether we should factor in optimism bias and promoter bias. Projects that people want to see done tend to give rise to optimism about the real cost. We'll also examine the whole issue of low-price tenders as to whether we should look more at median price, because we do have a real concern that some companies are lowballing, coming in with very low tender prices to get the contract and then coming back with claims thereafter. And we also particularly want to look at past form of contractors and public service references, because there are one or two contractors who, quite frankly, I would not like to see get a public contract again in this state. However, EU procurement law doesn't allow us to ban people from tendering, but perhaps what we can do is work into the scoring system a public service reference or a past form clause looking back at previous projects. And I should say finally, Count Corl, I'm sorry to go over time, this is something that we have got right in the past. The NRA, for example, for years and years and years, and deputies opposite will remember this, ran over and ran late. But it got it right subsequently, and TII is bringing all the road projects in on time and on budget at the moment. And the local authorities on water projects were notorious for running late and running over, and Irish Water runs in its projects on time and on budget, so we can learn from past mistakes and also past successes.